we did join something. So like we in New Jersey in the last few years, a group came up called the IPTA, or the Independent
Oh,
Physical
cool.
Therapy Associates.
Like a
So
rehab alliance of sorts, or
yeah, in a sense, right.
okay,
So it's
cool.
kind of
Yeah.
like a super group in a sense. So you all come
Super group.
together under one umbrella, one tax ID, and you have some shared services: HR, billing, credentialing, payroll, which is awesome because those are all the things that like you don't want to do. Yeah, they could
So,
care less that you have this certification or you're one
I'm a
on one.
vestibular therapist that does
Yeah, no,
concussions in southeastern New Jersey. No, they don't care.
yeah.
Yeah.
How many
But if
of
you have a
your,
thousand visits a week, they start to listen.
yeah, exactly.
All right, guys, and welcome to today's episode of the Levels Podcast. I am pumped to have Paul Vidal, owner of Specialized Physical Therapy. He's got 2 locations in Burlington and Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He's also a former APTA New Jersey president, which is awesome. He's got 2 beautiful little girls that are, I think they're teenagers now, Paul, which is
Yeah.
which is wild. And then him and his wife also live out in southeastern New Jersey. So, Paul, welcome, man. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. I appreciate it. Yeah, the girls are going to be 21 and 18 this year.
21 and 18. Let's go. So I
Yeah,
got a
man.
9 and a 6-year old, and it's all chaos. So I can't even imagine having 21,
Yeah, no.
21 and a teenager. So, well, congrats, man. And I know beforehand we were just kind of talking about like your progression. So, we always go over, bring owners that are on different levels. So that's kind of why we call this the Levels Podcast. And the first thing that I want to talk to you about is the kind of the de-evolution versus the growth, because you had 3 locations before COVID.
Yeah.
And sometimes you hear the COVID story, like COVID hit and then we closed the location or whatever, but you already had like in the plans to close the location. So which is interesting because we have so many owners that are very status driven, of like, they can't even fathom like closing something, and what that would do to like their ego. So just kind of walk us through, like, why did you like, where was the clinic at? And then like, why did you make a decision to kind of close that down first? And then we'll kind of get into like where we're at now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah, we had grown. I mean, we started in '05, and then by time of 2016, we were at 3 offices. So it wasn't crazy fast growth, but we got the 3 offices, and it was cool. I mean, it was exciting, but you know, ultimately it comes down to I kind of had to simplify my life. There was a lot going on, and this third location was located in Princeton, New Jersey. Great location to
Oh,
have an
cool.
office, and it's just it was 45 minutes from my nearest location, which was probably a little too far. The drive was a little bit crazy, and I was still a producer in that office too, a couple days a week while trying to produce in the other 2 clinics. Meanwhile, you're owning everything and trying to manage it, and it's running you, and that
Yeah.
whole story. And at that time, the latest part of the Princeton years, 2017 to 2019, I was also serving as the president of the state association. So it was just the plate was really full. So it was a hard decision, but I had to kind of, figure out what can I do here. And I just, I had to simplify things. And, we talked earlier before we got on. It's just, you don't know what you don't know. And if I knew then what I know now after working with, rehab CEOs over the last few years, it might have been a different story just because I would have better systems in place, things like that. But I just, I wasn't very organized. So that was on me, but I just had to do something to right the ship, if that makes
And,
sense.
and I think for you, I know all that stuff sounds great, but realistically, I think this right now, you're just a different person, different owner, different identity. So if you took your skill set now, no doubt you would have been able to go back to that location and blow it up. Princeton, is that like the Princeton? Is that like Princeton University? Like
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
okay. All
We
right.
were 2 miles north of the university. Great location. Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful area too.
Yeah, it's just, well, and we use the analogy like, are you overwhelmed or you burnt out? It's like, so like overwhelmed is just like when you're at a restaurant and like they come over to pour your coffee and they just keep pouring and you're like, no, no, I'm good. And you're like, no, no, you need more. And you're like, no, no, seriously. And you're like, no, you need more coffee. And then all of a sudden it's just overflowing and on the table. And like burnt out is like the candle analogy where like the wick's going down and there's like literally nothing left to burn. So for you, Paul, it just sounds like it was more like there's just too much. Yeah, 3 locations, you're treating all the time, you're APTA president,
Yeah,
just way too much. So
yeah.
So curious then, when did you make the decision to like say like, hey, enough is enough? Like, let's offload that location. And then did you also offload the presidency and decide to just not re-up and do it another year? Or how does that work? Like,
Yeah, so I think we started having discussions with the Princeton office in late 2018, give or take, and it actually moved fairly quickly for a sale. I mean, it wasn't a huge office, but the buyers were looking to get into that market. I knew them, and we already had a good rapport, so that kind of made things a lot easier. And and for me, the presidency, I knew I was just going to do a one term. So terms in Jersey are 2 years. So I knew I
oh,
was
okay.
just 2 years and done. And
2 year commitment. Yeah.
I've I had held multiple positions in the state prior to that, and I just knew I wanted to do this. I felt I had a responsibility to do it, but one term was what I was willing to do.
What was good. Yeah. It was like, oh, we're not going to do the 2 terms. Which is
Yeah.
fine. Now for you, you threw something in there, which I want a lot of our listeners to understand here is that he didn't just close a location. So you did sell to somebody. So you did sell the
Yes.
Princeton location to somebody. And we don't have to get into the details of the
Yep.
buyout or whatever that looks like. But if you do get into a position where you're like, maybe this isn't, and Paul probably had some profitability behind it. It's just like, he's driving 45, minutes, miles to Princeton, and he's coming back to Burlington. And he still has, at the time. So you mentioned your kids were 21 and I think you said 18. So that's like early teenage years then
Yep.
for a couple, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So it's just like a lot of just family chaos, a lot of family responsibilities, and then business owner, just not a time to have this. And so if you guys ever run into a situation where you do want to offload something, don't just close it because there might be something there to purchase, which is awesome. So for you guys, was it private equity or was it another local PT clinic up in the
Yeah,
area?
another local
Okay,
private
cool.
practice. They had a bunch of offices, and like I said, looking to get into the area. And yeah, you're right. Actually, you kind of hit the nail on the head too. It's like it got so busy that I always told my wife like you want to be around when they're like in the high school years, like and there's a lot more things going on. Like it's almost
Yeah.
like probably more important to be there. So that's why I wanted to do just 1 year, a one term with presidency because I knew it would take a lot of time. So
Mm.
I figured by 2019, my youngest would be entering into high school, and my
Gotcha.
my oldest was almost done.
No, it's great. Yeah, I heard I'm not 100% sure who quoted this, but it's the time you spend with your kids is like 85, 90% before the age of 18. And then once they're 18, they're kind of, I said, well, that can't be true. And then, here I am, 37. And, I think I saw my mom for like 4 days this year, so it's just
Yeah,
like, I got to get better at it. It's
yeah,
100%. So I got to get better at going up and visiting them. But at the
all
same
the
time,
time.
it's just that's it, man. It's just life happens and you're kind of on your way. So it's
Yeah,
it's interesting. So you guys, okay, so you're able to sell that, and then COVID hit. Obviously, we just
yeah,
if we made it. If you think running a business now is hard, like for some of you guys listening, you guys did not run a business during COVID, so that thing is just like that'll show you your true stripes quickly. So how did you guys make out during COVID? And then now we're currently at 2 locations, but you also added something else. So we
yeah.
added, and we'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, go
Sure.
ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, COVID. I mean, obviously that hit everybody and to varying degrees. And we actually, speaking of the sale of the Princeton office, was scheduled to go for March, early April of 2020, and that just got put to a halt. So
Oh, okay.
the parties agreed to say, okay, let's just because like no one was seeing
Nobody
patients. We
knew.
closed
Nobody
for
knew what
like
was happening. Yeah.
yeah, and we closed for like 6 weeks, and then we came back with all these, all the craziness. But then we were able to finalize the deal in September of 2020. So because we had to build back our volume up, so on and so forth. Thinking about it, I mean, how we navigated through COVID, like a lot of people, and we had to quickly pivot, and we had to figure out what we were going to do. And yeah, I mean, from April to June, it looked horrible, right? That if you look at the
Hmm.
your trends on 2020, things just took a nosedive,
Yeah,
obviously.
just don't
But
look at those numbers.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just a pseudo year, right? But come the fall when we bounced back and then we built back up and here we are. So, but that was tough. I mean, we had to take advantage of things that were offered. We all had this, the Medicare payments, and you had care, not CARES Act. What is that stuff called? I
The
forget. But
PPP and the EIDL and all that.
yeah,
Yeah, all that stuff.
EIDL. And it's funny because like, I came out of school and I had actually had no debt, right? I mean,
Hmm.
granted, we went to PT school and it was like 50 grand for 5 years, you know? So,
Yeah.
you
And that
know,
was
now it's 50
University
grand.
of Sciences, and then you went to St. Augustine, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
called the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy and Science. And actually I go there tonight for an alumni meeting. It's pretty cool for the first time in a
Let's
couple of years.
go. Awesome.
But yeah, so I mean, school was quote unquote cheap, right? But like, so I had very little debt, but now here
Yeah.
I am with the EIDL and I feel, and I have debt, but it's just how it
Yeah.
goes, you know?
Yeah, it
But
is. It's wild. I mean, because if you think about like, going through all that stuff, and I mean, there's stress, and then there was that kind of because we didn't know, we didn't know, and then the portals would open up to get the money, and then the portals would close really quickly because they would sell out, and it's just like it was just, and then there was another grouping of loan, and it's just like, are they going to be forgiven? Are they going to be, do keep or talk like? So it was crazy, and then you made it through COVID, which is great, and I'm glad
yeah,
that a lot of people did, and I always like to bring up COVID because I think people have a lot of amnesia, they look at their business now and there's all these issues. And it's just like, well, Paul, I mean, you made it through COVID, man. So like as a healthcare company, that's pretty incredible. We're not just one clinic, but another location. And then you even decided to throw in a CrossFit gym into the mix
yeah,
too. So you were running a gym during some of this stuff too. So it's
yeah,
wild. So for you guys, now you mentioned that you rebounded quickly. I think one of the most unique things about you and your company, you are, vestibular concussion, your niche. You also are outpatient orthopedic stuff. But we talk about all the time, hey, Paul, you probably could be making a little bit more revenue if we change the volume or if we do this. And you're very tooth and nail, like, hey, I'm not changing our model. And Paul does a really good job of saying, like, this is what built us to where we're at. And I know that we can make more profit, but we have to figure out how can we make more profit doing other things because I'm not changing my model. And I think that's really, really cool to see because now as an entrepreneur, we have to ask more empowering questions. Well, how can we make it work? And, for you guys, like just explain your model real quick. And then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into like, because of the model that you have, the leadership between and the efficiency you have to have. And we'll talk about that in a second. So, Paul, what's your model that you guys are doing as far as treatment goes?
sure. And keeping in mind, this is in the state of New Jersey.
This is New Jersey. This is in network New Jersey. I know that there's some out of network clinics out there,
Yeah,
but if you guys are not familiar with New Jersey, we're talking like $60 reimbursement, 70, 75, for the majority of insurances. Yes, there are a couple that pay a little bit higher,
yeah,
but average reimbursement is right around like 80, 90. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not even, so it's low. It's low. So low reimbursement, high volume for in-network clinics. But Paul, you decided that you guys were going to do what?
Yeah, I mean, we basically we do 40-minute treatment, including eval models, so it's one-on-one therapist patient. We don't have aides on the floor at all. So it's a high quality, high value kind of approach to care. And one, it benefits the patient obviously, but to the therapist benefit because they're not burnt out, and they have time to think on their feet, and so to help their patients out. So that's kind of how I wanted things to go and be able to provide hands-on care, as we need. My background is also a manual therapist. So that's a big part of what I do. But just having time with the patient and having time to think. And then by the end of each day and by the end of each week, the therapists are not just, burnt out and then they look forward to coming to work, or they enjoy work, I should say.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and then ultimately the patients are the huge beneficiary of this because they get hopefully the best care possible.
Now, for you guys, because in New Jersey, if you're in network, it's usually
Yeah,
like 30-minute scheduling, or it's two patients top of the hour, or it's double, triple booking. So it's
yeah,
like, there's some of that out there. Or you're out of network where you basically just, crank up your fees and then you're charging patients and, which is, there's nothing wrong with it, but we do know a lot of out of network people in New Jersey. And so for you guys, though, you have been able to leverage the fact that you are one-on-one for 40 minutes, no tech support, and you are using that more of as like a recruitment tool then. So how has that been as far as like keeping that model and keeping your patients and your staff engaged and actually using it for retention of staff or patients and then recruitment tool for your therapist?
yeah, great. I mean, I think we always talk about, like, especially new grads coming out, that their biggest things: mentoring, con ed, and
Sure.
I forget
Skill
the other
set
thing was.
mastery. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like,
So yeah, I mean, so I think you're right. I mean, we can use that to our advantage, and what we do and how we do it. is going to resonate with a lot of therapists who are looking for that. Now, other therapists that our approach doesn't resonate with, okay, great, no problem, no harm, no foul. That we'll just part our
Yeah.
ways
Yeah.
and go. But I tell folks, if you're looking to grow and learn in an environment where you have time to think, you can spend time with your patients, then this is the place for you. If you have an interest in vestibular rehab and concussion, even a plus, right?
Even better.
I'd rather
Yeah.
have obviously the culture first. We can always teach the skill in a sense, but the person is probably the most important thing. And we want someone who can buy into what we do, kind of the why of what we do. And if that matches, most times it's a really good fit. That's how we've been able to do it. I mean, we've had some hit or misses, obviously, we all have, and we got to regroup and then we go back to it.
Yeah, man. And for the staff, I thought you said something really interesting there because these days I think personally, because there is a little bit of a PT shortage, not a little bit, there's a lot of it between the fact that we have COVID. I think people forgot about COVID because we're now in 2024 heading into 5. And I think
Yeah.
that it's been 4 years now, which is wild to think about. But you have PTs that weren't going to school, they weren't going to classes, they weren't doing on-site clinicals. A lot of it was online learning. And and there was decrease in applications during 2000, 2001 and 2. So there was decreased amount of people getting into PT school. And now we're having some of those PTs coming through failing their board exam at just astonishing rates. I think a lot of universities used to like toot their horn and be like, hey, we have a 95, 92, 90, 99% first time pass rate. And I'm hearing universities right now that have 60, 70 first time pass rates.
Wow.
Which
Yeah.
is crazy, which is super low. So when we start to look at it like that, it's like we have decreased applicants, we have decreased pass rates, the demand's through the roof, the supply is down. Walk me through what are some of the things that you're hearing with some of those people coming in. And we have PT schools that are having lower pass rates, and we have students right now that were decreased, admissions during COVID, and we have this massive like supply demand curve issue. And for you guys right now, to be able to get, I think you hired 3 people this year, 3, 4. How many therapists did you hire this year, Paul?
We hired 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think you
Definitely
hired
2.
about,
I'd have to go back.
yeah, I think it was about 3 total. So for you
Yeah.
guys now to be able to hire 3 between the 2 locations, like what are some of the things? Is it the, one-on-one for an hour or the one-on-one for the 40 minutes? Or is it like the fact that you're selling them more the culture, or is it the structured mentorship? Is it the career advancement? Like, what are you presenting to these guys that they're just like, yes, I want to work for Specialized? Like, what does that look like for you?
Gotcha. Well, if you subscribe to my channel, no, I'm joking.
That's it. There. Yeah. Where do we find it? Paul's on a podcast every week too. So this to be very clear. So you can check him out. So Google him, check his blog on Monday. So there you go. So let's go ahead, man.
Now, I think it honestly, it's the culture thing. And this is something, when COVID hit, it was weird because it was crazy, obviously. But it gave us a chance to kind of to hit the reset button, because prior to COVID, we were doing the every half hour. We were doubling them when we needed. We had aides, and it was chaos. I mean, it really was. And then when we had when I actually had time to think, it was forced upon us because we closed. Well, we didn't have to close, but we chose for a couple of weeks. I just said, all right, we're doing everything completely different, because this is why. And you're so busy doing things, prior to COVID, you're doing 2 an hour, sometimes maybe 3 an hour. Things are just happening. You have 3 offices. You don't know if you're coming or going, because I lack systems in a sense. But then what you fail to do is you fail to appreciate the greatest assets you have, which is your employees, right? I really took time to just kind of dial back and look at things. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, so I might be a slight disciple of him, but he really has some good stuff there. Just what's that? Yeah, well,
start with why, right? Come on.
Yeah. You start with why. But he's big on like empathy and having empathy and understanding that and demonstrating and practicing that. And I think that's something I've been really trying to work on, since COVID. And I think it's been to our benefit. And I think when I talk to people who are interested in the job and we lay out, the specifics of what we do, but then kind of giving them my approach, my why of how I run my business, I think that resonates with, people, and that really resonates with them, then it's like we get a lot of that yes momentum we talk about, because it's just checking the boxes. Great, we can do
Yeah.
this, we can do
Yeah.
this, but it's supported by or bolstered by, they know that they have an owner that's you know thinking about them, and have, like, hopefully their best interest, or at heart, in terms of develop them as a professional, and help them develop as a person too.
Now, for the empathy side of things, because I don't want to miss over that, because some people would be like, empathy, and you know everybody's got their own kind of definition, but we are seeing, and even with our kind of team, we kind of go from like a 10 to 1 or 10 to none, like recognition, praise versus recognition and punishment. So I think a lot of times it's just like, hey Paul, I need you to fill out these metrics, and if they're not where they need to be, you come in and be like, why aren't they where they need to
Right.
be? And people just aren't responding to that these days. People are very like, they want to come, they want a high energy environment, they want to have fun, and they want recognition, praise, kudos, and they want to feel like they're part of a winning team. So when you made
Yeah.
the switch to like being more of a, and you mentioned producer, so you're producing, so you couldn't do a lot of that. Now then you went into the leadership role, and now sitting there as like in the leadership role, communicator role, and having time to be able to pour into these people, and really show up with this empathy. Like, what are some examples that you're kind of seeing that people are really resonating on that side of the management?
Yeah, I mean, for like one of the best examples is like if someone is just they're not performing from a metric standpoint, like we expect them to. We have a certain, obviously we do have some productivity standards, which by the way, for us is 57 visits a week, which is like people are like, how do you do that? But the but if we see it down and we look at their clinical efficiency, one of the stats we track, and it's down, the first thing that I'm working on going to is just being like, hey, I noticed this is down, but like, everything good? Are you like, how are
Mm,
things going? Like, because there may be something outside of work that's
yeah.
totally impacting their ability or to perform in work. And if we just come in, you know, fist pumping and crashing down on them, that just probably won't go well, especially if there actually is an issue there. So I think the fact that we can just take the time to ask that question, they really appreciate that, because they're like, hey, that's that they're maybe not expecting that from their boss, so to speak, or their employer.
Yeah, here we go.
So,
Here comes the
yeah,
hand.
right.
So
Now, I mean,
that's
listen, I
awesome.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it's we have to have tough conversations at times, and we've had to use a performance improvement plan with certain with one employee more recently, but that comes after the fact of trying to understand. And even when you do those type of tough conversations and do those type of plans, we're still demonstrating the empathy, but there's a greater understanding of what needs to happen, and
Sure.
you have to revisit that. It's almost like you have to re-onboard them,
Yeah,
right?
help me,
So
help me help you, which is
yeah,
interesting.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I like that, because so you go in with the approach of like, hey Paul, I noticed that your numbers the last 3 weeks are down a little bit. Or is
yeah,
everything going okay at home?
yeah,
And you kind of hit it with that versus just coming in and be like, what's going on? Like, what do we need? And then they just kind of totally shut down. But because you do come a little bit, hey, but productivity aside, and specialized PT aside, like how are you doing? And
yeah,
I think that's really powerful. We had that happen a couple of times where someone's performance was slipping, or we got some patient complaints on a therapist that like just doesn't get complaints. And then when you lean in, you're like, hey, like what's going on? And then all of a sudden, like waterworks, it's just like, oh my gosh, like, I had no idea. Like, please tell me next time. And then
yeah,
like, but so many people just suffer in silence. And I think that, when you do come in as we always talk about just be human, and be, as an owner, sometimes it's, yeah, KPIs, money, financials, like things that we need to grow the business to do things. But I think that if you do get into that more, how do I manage people, and understanding that they're people first and producer second, like it's just, I think that's huge. So, because we do have a lot of people that listen here, and I even know I slip into it sometimes, that it's just like we do have to come in with a lot more praise and a lot more empathy these days than we used to, because things are changing, and I think that change management is important. So that's huge. Now you had a little slip there, and you said like 57 slots or 57 arrivals, and people wonder how we do that. Well, I did the math quick in so you got 60 slots and you got 57 arrivals. So you got to be super efficient here to make this work in
yeah.
New Jersey. So how are you guys? How are you as like the owner of the company, like getting, first of all, your team to care as much as you do? I think a lot of people always say that. They're like, my team doesn't you know, and I know you're a Simon Sinek guy, so there's definitely some vision behind, there's some why behind this thing. But, you know, how are you getting your team to like buy into like, if we're going to do this, we have to do it right? And how are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not always easy, but I think one, you know, the old saying of leading by example. Now it's tough because I'm really rarely on the floor. Like I still see patients here and there, but you
Mhm.
know, it's just, um, you know, it's just taking the time to like, for example, the last couple of weeks we've done just what we call touch point meetings, like half-hour meetings with the staff. You know, this is like what we call that retention season that you talk about. So
Mhm.
we we just we don't even talk clinical, you know, just hey, how's it going? Everything good? You know, is there anything we need to do? And I think just having those type of actions kind of like backs up what we're talking about. So we're kind of like we're walking the talk, so to speak.
Yeah,
And I'm not just
makes
throwing a
sense.
bunch of fluff at them. Yeah, I mean it's tough, but you know, as the owner, and maybe we'll hit upon this in a bit, but like one of the things is that I also look at is, you know, what are our opportunities out there, you know, for the company to stay relevant and viable as things go on, because as we all know, probably in all states, you know, the private practice arena payment issue is a big issue.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
probably not going to really greatly improve if we continue to do the same. So
So what did you change though? Because if your volume is, if you're gonna, so anybody that doesn't know revenue, it's either we increase volume or we increase RPV or we increase both.
right,
So if your volume's staying the same, and actually, I love what you did, because you know, we tell a lot of owners that like if you're doing 30 slots, 30 scheduling, and you have techs out the wazoo, which for us, our biggest retention rate for staff was techs. It's like they lasted 3 months, and then I had to train another one, and then they were
yeah,
not in a bad way. They might have went to PT school, or they, and to be fair, a lot of them got burnt out. Minimum wage, a lot of delegation. It just wasn't good. So then, you know, when we looked at it, like, you know, can we cut tax and just go to 40s and just be one on one with their like, and people loved it. So you guys were staying at the, so you cut a lot. You went from 70 slots to 60, which is you just it would 7 or 8 providers. So through, you know, a lot of volume just went off. So what did you do to increase at least increase your revenue at least by $5 or $10 or whatever that looks like? What did you like? Did you join something or what did you do?
yeah. Well, yeah, that's exactly. I mean, so like I was, we did join something. So like we in New Jersey in the last few years, a group came up called the IPTA, or the Independent
Oh,
Physical Therapy
cool.
Associates.
Like a
So
rehab alliance of sorts, or
yeah, in a sense, right.
okay,
So it's
cool.
kind of
Yeah,
like you know, like a super group in a sense. So you all come
super good.
together
Cool.
under one umbrella, one tax ID, um, and you have some shared services: HR, billing, credentialing, payroll, which is awesome because those are all the things that like you don't want to do. It takes
So they do
time.
that for you. Oh, they do. Oh,
Oh
that's
yeah, they
awesome.
do that all. Yeah, and then what happens is in this group, in this particular group, you maintain your full equity. But now you become, I was 2 offices. Now we're part of 23, I think, and growing. So you gain scale, economies of scale, which obviously, you know, that helps you with a lot of things,
Yeah.
namely negotiating with payers.
Negotiating contract, because that's the number one thing is how big are you? So if you're too small, they don't talk to
Right.
you.
Yeah, they don't, they
So,
could care less that you have this certification or you're one
I'm a
on one.
vestibular therapist that does
Yeah, no,
concussions in southeastern New Jersey. No, they don't care.
yeah.
Yeah.
How
But
many
if you
of
have a
their,
thousand visits a week, they start to listen.
yeah, exactly. And how many of their members do you cover in a sense, you know, covered
Oh, okay.
lives? So yeah, so that's helped out, and we finished a full year of that, and knowing what I know now and how it has helped us, you know, I wish I didn't kick the tires on it for a year and a half, because that's what I did. But it's just you don't know, and it's a big move, you know, and
Okay.
there's a lot of upside to it, but then you have like you put up these barriers of why you can't do it. But now that I can see it from the other side, it's like, wow, that was just, you know, that not foolish of me to do it, but I wish I didn't do that because now I could have had 2 or 3 years with this as opposed to 1 year.
Okay. What was your
Uh,
hesitation? Was it just not knowing the equity side of things, or was it not
yeah,
knowing
well,
the
no, I knew we
structure?
weren't going
Or
to give that up. But, you know, we were just coming out of COVID in a sense, right? And still
there's a lot going
recovering.
on? Yeah.
And to me, it's like, you know, we run very lean. So our margin is low to begin with. So, you know, it's just, you know, you have to be comfortable with that, first of all, at least in my mind. My model in New Jersey, you have to be comfortable knowing that there's a certain margin that you're going to have that's not going to even come close to comparing to something like in the Midwest or what have you. But that doesn't mean you can't do better. We were able to cut some costs, right? We don't need some support staff. All right. There was just having different systems in place allowed us to be more efficient and effective. And then, joining the super group allows us to not only get better payer contracts, but now instead of I have one person who was handling and try to process 300 plus claims a week, now you have a team of like 6, 7, 8 people.
Yeah,
So
they see all the
I got to
data.
tell you,
Yeah.
it's mind boggling how much money I probably left on the table because we just didn't have
Ayo.
the bandwidth.
Yeah,
We
man.
didn't have the
We
bandwidth.
don't look in the past. We just keep looking at the
Yeah,
future because that's the always
exactly.
how much money. That's the especially my owners that realize that AMA billing is a thing. And they sit there and they're like,
Yeah,
wait a second, what's AMA billing? And then you're like, oh,
yeah.
well, it's this thing that if you differentiate code, you can get more. And they're just like, wait, so not everybody bills CMS billing. It's just like, no, your commercials do a. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, how much money did I lose? I'm like, I don't know. Let's just focus going this way. So that's awesome. So then well, that makes sense why there was some hesitation there because you just got rid of or just offloaded Princeton and then
Yeah,
COVID hit. So there's all this uncertainty,
yeah,
the FUD, what do they call it? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And then you're moving into this whole like, come join our super group. And you're like, ah. So, but then, I love the quote. It says like the time it takes to make a decision is significantly longer than the results after you make the decision. So it's just like the time it takes to
yeah,
make the decision is significantly longer than the time it takes you to get the results from the decision you make. So you made the decision to then join the super group, and now you're into this conglomerate, which is awesome. It sounds like they do your payroll, your HR. They're negotiating not just insurance contracts, but also like healthcare benefits, different things
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
completely. Yep.
Awesome. So, and then you have the data behind, now you have a power team doing your own billing. So, like, can other people in New Jersey join this, or are you guys a closed group? Or are you open, or someone has to leave the boat before you bring someone else on, or what's that look like?
No, no, it's certainly an open group. It's we're looking for private practice folks, and not only New Jersey, but we actually have two members in Pennsylvania.
Let's
So
go. Oh, so you're
yeah,
going across the border.
yeah,
Cool.
it can happen. Yeah, so
Take
there,
care of my
it's
Highmark people over there.
there you go, exactly.
So there.
But it's mostly, started mostly like in the southern Jersey area because that's where I'm
Okay.
located. Like if you know Philadelphia, I'm just due east of that. But then we have a bunch of clinics in the north part of Jersey, and then a couple in Philly. So it's getting there. I think people understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to save private practice, and think about all the little things you have to do as an owner that we all did, right? And imagine you have to do payroll, you got to be the HR person, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Now you can come in and that stuff's done for you, and then you can focus on the things you really need to focus on to
That's
grow your
awesome.
practice.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's awesome. It's so cool because I know even Rick Katz out in the Northwest Rehab Alliance. He does Washington and Oregon, and there's North and South Carolina's got some alliances. There's these groups that are these super groups that are starting up,
yeah,
and it's so cool. But, people always say like, oh, the APTA needs to do something, and there's people out there doing stuff. It's just I think a lot of people just
yes,
don't know that they exist. And when you start asking the right questions in empowering stuff. So like Paul went to 40s and he said like, what can I do to make this work? He started to look into other options, and then he found the super group, and that thing was starting up, and now you guys are a part of it. And I think overall that you're in its infancy in the grand scheme of things.
yeah,
So it's only
yeah,
going to get better, I would imagine.
yeah, absolutely. And it's and it just and you bring together minds that think alike, but all have different perspectives on things. And I think in the right way when that's channeled, that's definitely a win for everybody. That's part of the group. So and again, the vision is to try to save private practice, keep us viable,
What
and
do you
then
think is the biggest threat? Do you think it's just declining reimbursement in general, or do you think it is these, corporate clinics that are scooping up the hospital contracts and just rolling $300-400 visits and just scooping us up, or what is it? What's our threat here, Paul? Is it AI? Robots are taking over the world and we're all being
there you
replaced
go.
by
That's right.
virtual front desk and PTs? Like, what are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that there's some concepts within the concepts there. I mean, some of the immediate things is the the hospital systems obviously can with their better rates and offer a better comprehensive package for for new grads in particular coming out, or for anybody, it's hard to compete with that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would say that's a huge threat. But then I think in the bigger picture too, it's just, and this is not a knock on like institutions, but just the it's can our profession afford the education type of thing, right? And
Mhm.
then meaning like ultimately there's going to be like well, I don't know if it's going to be ultimate, but like, are we going to have enough PTs to fill the slots? Because there are the people entering
Yeah.
the profession, right? I know that there's a lot of
I think
talk
you,
about that.
yes, you could recruit, but I think the supply demand curve is it's because we moved to the doctorate program, it's never going to be you're never going to close that gap.
Yeah,
Uh, I mean, because with all the baby boomers and stuff coming through right now, and I know that we're up over 300 accredited universities. So it seems like every university and their brother is now getting accredited because they're like, well, if we could get 60 kids to come in and do a PT class, we can make a couple $1 million a year. So they're actively looking to get PT programs into
mm,
all the universities. So I think we're probably about 5 to 10 years away from like 60% of most of the D1 schools having a PT program. So that it's
yeah,
coming because I already saw the pick cast go from like a $1.15, $1.20 a couple of years ago to now over 300 on the list. So it's, but with that being said, the programs are being a little bit more watered down. They're just getting accredited. They're not
mm,
passing their board exams. More people are getting let in that maybe probably shouldn't be let in yet. So I think we are going to start to see where I like what you said earlier. It's like I just need culture fits, but I could teach the skill set. So it's just like I think that if we as owners understand that like we can't, there's the unicorns aren't showing up anymore. It's just like we got to take B and C PTs and make them into A's and B's. Like I think that that's where the secret sauce is how do I get structured mentorship? How do I get proper onboarding? How do I get proper training? How do I get career ascension? And how do I create this big vision that people actually want to fit their careers inside of? I think
yeah,
that's who's going to
good
win the
point.
game. And you do a great job with that. I know you're a Simon Sinek guy. You know, he's a big fan of like, can I trust you with my life and can I trust you with my wife? And he's like,
Yeah,
I don't need you to like me. I need you to respect me. Empathy. I love Simon. I think he's great. And I could tell that the way that you manage your team, they want to come and they want to work for you and they want to, show up. So I know that we talked about like, hey, possibly closing some stuff and here and kind of regrouping. I love the word that you use, reset. I think that COVID was an amazing reset for a lot of owners
yeah,
because you were blessed with an opportunity that people are like, if I were to start over again, what would I do differently? And, there's a lot of owners that fold it and just close down. And there's a lot of owners that were like, I'm going to reset and do things my way. And, to hear what you're building here is just awesome, Paul. So what is the plan then going forward? We got 2 locations, no pressure. Are we
yeah.
trying to then go to 3 or you got other plans that you're looking for? Or maybe you're going to be a little bit more involved in the super group then? Like what is Paul Vidal
Yeah.
2005 to 10 look like or 20
Yeah, it's
2030 look
interesting.
like?
Yeah, no, it's an awesome question. I ask that every day.
That's
But
with the
it's
stealth font. It's
yeah.
like
Well, seeing, I guess quote unquote the success we've had in the past year with being with the super group, I think that allows my mind to think better and
yeah,
a
yeah.
little easier and not as stressed. And but the having a going back to a third office again is not out of the question. And I know you and I have talked about it in terms of certain things need to be in place for that to happen. So I'm working on those things to at least make a third office a possibility if I want to
Yeah.
really move in that direction. But we have to have certain things in place, right? Leadership team has to be established, right? I have to be
Mhm.
out of care. And there has to be a certain amount of reserves that I need to have so we can either, if we have to borrow, not borrow a lot, or maybe we can just do it ourselves.
Maybe
So
you'd borrow to buy the building, but not borrow to
yeah,
open
there you
the
go.
building.
So I
So,
like that. Yeah.
maybe you're going to buy the space, but you don't want to be borrowing a ton of money to do a build out cost. Yeah, just to pay a loan back. Yeah.
Yeah, so that type of stuff is we're certainly open to that. You mentioned earlier, we didn't really dive into, but my one office Burlington is also home to my CrossFit affiliate. So I have
Yeah,
a
let's
CrossFit
go.
affiliate called
Yeah.
CrossFit Surge, um, and
And you opened that after COVID, correct?
yeah, so well,
Ish,
it's kind of
COVID-ish.
a long, convoluted story. I owned it in 2016, sold it if you could believe this, we signed the papers April 1st, 2020 to
Oh,
sell the
that was in
ticket.
COVID. That was when
Yeah.
people were talking about it. Yeah.
Right. And because we thought we'd be closed for 2 weeks, right? And then of course Jersey, just gyms were closed
No, you guys were shut
forever.
down. Yeah, you guys were shut down.
So, but then what happened just didn't work out for the new owner like we wanted it to. So I was able to kind of take back the CrossFit affiliate. I rebranded it, called it a different name in 2023 February. And from that point on, I mean, we took it back with like 20 members and we're close to 100.
Let's go.
So
Close to 100 now. Is that what you're?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome, man.
So yeah, and it's great because now it's like we have this, you know, thing where we can promote movement and promote wellness and fitness, which is really, you know, ultimately what we want to do. And, you know, when we have patients who graduate, they have an option or a choice to maybe get into this. We have a strong senior fitness program that's part of the CrossFit, which is great. You know, it's like we do like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
hybrid of CrossFit and chair stuff. But every week, like today, we had a 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock class. Tuesday, Thursday, we have 10 and 11 o'clock for seniors. And, you know, we get about between the two classes, almost 40 seniors each
Let's
day.
go. That's
So
awesome.
it's really cool.
Yeah.
So we're trying to build that. We, you know, you have presence in the community. It allows us a chance to communicate with them too. If they were to need therapy, then
You got a
we can do that for
feeder
them.
program. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of works both ways. You know, we work close with our CrossFit athletes to make sure they're moving well. But if they're noticing things and it's just they can't improve with just some simple cueing or something's persistent, hey, you know what? Why don't you go see one of our PTs? Let's take a more in-depth evaluation, see what's going on, so we can get you back on track. So that's worked out well. And you know, the facilities, it's a 10,000 square foot facility.
Oh,
So
it's
now
gorgeous, man. It's
we're
awesome.
hosting competitions, we're hosting courses. So they talk about like just non patient care revenue coming in, so to speak.
Courses for CrossFit courses or like CEU
And
courses?
kind of and
Con
PT
Yeah, yeah,
kind
yeah.
of yeah.
Yeah.
So
Which
we have CrossFit
huge,
courses if you
huge
want to do
gold
like
mine. If you could do
what's that?
on-site, if you could do on-site CEUs and then charge
Yeah,
local therapists for it, yeah.
yeah.
Make a couple extra. And plus, it's a good recruiting tool, you know.
Right.
Take a
Yeah,
company. See?
right. And actually having CrossFit courses, like if you want to be like a CF1 or CF2, so to speak, level one, level two CrossFit course, it brings awareness to your box. And the nice thing about this for me with the CrossFit end is like I coach a couple classes a week, but I have a bunch of coaches. So it's like it
Yeah.
runs and it happens, and I don't always have to be there, which is great, which is almost the exact opposite of how you start with PT. You're always there.
PT.
You're trying
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
some of us are trying to get out of it. But so it's a nice thing because the CrossFit end is, you know, I can work on that, but I don't have to always coach every class and things like that. So it's, you know, right now it's going pretty good. Obviously, we're working on improving it, but
That's awesome,
yeah.
man. Yeah, how cool is that? Because you know, for your demographic of older population and vestibular and balance and fall, and this is just not a knock on CrossFit because you know, I think a lot of the older individuals are like, oh, CrossFit, like, oh, that's for young kids and athletes and whatever. But for them
Yeah.
to be in your facility and they're like, well, what's that? And you're like, that's CrossFit. And they're like, wait, that's CrossFit? I could do that. And you're like, well, yeah. So now you're exposing this otherwise population who might think it's too extreme or too whatever. And they're seeing it. And now all of a sudden, like they're doing it. And which I love because CrossFit is what? High twitch, high fast activities,
Mhm.
and you're working on these skills that if they ever go to fall, they know how to catch themselves and they
Yeah,
do those
exactly.
plyometric
Yeah.
exercise of sorts. So that's huge to be able to
Yeah,
see.
we totally related to that. You know, if you fall, how are you going to get up off the ground? Hey, can you get up out of the chair without even using your hands? Can you get out of bed? You know, like, you
Yeah.
know, having the
Yeah.
trunk strength control to do that stuff. And a lot of people have problems literally getting out of bed. They have to like pull on their feet
Turkish
or
get-ups. Is that what those are? Turkish.
Turkish get-ups. That's right. Yeah.
Turkish. There you go, sir.
Chinese planks.
Come on, grandma, get up off the kettlebell and we're working on Turkish get-ups today.
Well,
That's
listen,
sweet.
they
Huge.
deadlifted today.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know they're old, they're frail, they can't lift weights, you know, and then all of a sudden you got you know King Joe coming over here and pulling like you know his body weight plus, and he's 85 years old, and you're like, let's go, you know, and
Yeah,
it gives them a purpose again because I think a lot of times these older individuals they're not competing and they're not. That's why a lot of these 55 communities are popping up because they get people together again, and loneliness is one of the biggest factors for that. A lot of leads to the comorbidities, and then it's game over. But that's why they have ice cream socials and they golf and they this and that. So when you have a
yeah.
CrossFit community of older individuals, it's like, let's go. Like
Yeah,
that's,
man, it was cool today actually because some of the older guys were like, you could see them, they're getting a little pumped. They're like, oh, I can do this, man. It's cool.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they kind of push each other. So yeah, we have a lot of fun with it. So it's good.
No, that's awesome. And no, it's cool to see the evolution of it. And I think ultimately, you kind of go back to it. And I love that you don't know what you're trying to do yet. It's just like, well, it's like I'm just enjoying where we're at. I think so many owners are always like they get to a certain point, and this is your why, 5 years ago, and this is your vision, and then you get here and you're like, now I got to move the carrot again. And for you, Paul, it does sound like it's just like, hey, let's just get these two things running real quick, and let's get CrossFit up, and let's try to maximize this and get our check boxes in place, and then we'll see where we're at. Is it another clinic? Maybe, or are we going to start opening the door to maybe some of our PTs could start buying into things? I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
like, or do I want to take the money from business and just putting into investment things and just kind of chill for a little bit? That's the beautiful part about being a business owner is you can literally do whatever you want to do. And I love that right now you're just like you're not a status guy. We see so many owners with, they want, especially I can say this because my New Jersey guys, my New York guys are all status. They're all like, I gotta keep up with everybody on Long Island and the Hamptons and the New York City, and I gotta own all these things, even though I'm not profitable. But I like to tell people I own a lot of stuff. And it's just like I love that you're just like, hey, like my life is kind of not chaotic anymore. And I'm enjoying this. And I don't know how long this is going to last, but let's just make it last as long. So for the next kind of months here, what's your big focus here as we start wrapping up the podcast for the day? What's kind of the big things that Paul's focusing on here, and what's next?
Yeah, sure. So we just like we mentioned before, we just brought on two new therapists. That's why I said two instead of three, but you're right, we did have three, but one was
I
a
thought you said three.
yeah.
Okay,
So
two.
yeah,
Right.
so it's getting the team on board, getting them onboarded, right? And then also I just had a meeting with my director of operations. We basically just reviewed our organization board and like where are people at each post and who's doing what, because now it's time for me. Now we got another therapist on. And it creates another layer for me. So it's going to allow me to move out a little bit more, and I'm going to be able to delegate more to my director of operations, certain things that maybe I'm still doing that
Yeah,
she
yeah.
can take on. Right. So organizationally, we're doing that. Um, and then just continue to make community contacts. I mean, the fall is a huge community time. Like, I
That's
don't know how many
huge.
5Ks or things we've done, but it works for us. That's why we do it. And we give back to the community, which is, I think is a really good thing. So, that's our focus in the fall. But then ultimately, we're already planning our end of year meeting. We just had a couple leadership meetings on that, and we're going to be 20 years next year. So we're going to have a theme to our end of year meeting, so to speak, a little bit different than we've done in the past. And all right, we're coming up on 20 years, but what do we look like beyond that? And what's our message going to be? And what are we trying to do? So a big part, usually we do stats and surveys and this and that. And one of my staff said, if we do another survey, I swear to God.
There
So
you go. That's it.
I
Yeah.
said, okay, well, we may not get completely rid of surveys, but I hear you. So we're really going to, we get their input, but I think this time around, we're really going to kind of nail this down and try to get everybody's input, insight of what does specialized physical therapy look like 20 years and beyond, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's kind of bigger picture stuff. And I'm not sure how exactly it's going to play out, but that's kind of the cool thing. We can go any way we want with it. But yeah, that's kind of our focus right now.
I mean, how cool is that, man? Because you're like, I don't know where I want to take this thing, but if I got a group of people tell me they want to take this thing to the moon, then let's go. Like, it's just like, so ideally, a lot of times what happens is people have very small visions. And I thought they were always just something that you put on a website or a brochure or whatever that looks like. And our mission is, and, we have a trifold mission and we to help our patients and this and that. And it's just like, okay. But then when you really sit there and you're like, you got to have a vision that's just so big that these people could fit their careers inside of. And like when you show up and you're like, we're going to be the best PT clinic in New Jersey, or we're going to be the best PT clinic in the Northeast, or we're going to be whatever. I don't know. All of a sudden you have different energy and people are just like, there's a bigger purpose here. And showing up, treating patients, doing notes and going home is no longer a thing. It's just like, now we have a purpose, we have a why, and I'm all for it. So I think you'll be kind of surprised at what people say, man. Some people be
Yeah.
like, but other people are be like, hey, this is what I see. And now all of a sudden it's no longer your vision and it's theirs. And you're just along for the ride. And I think that's the cool part about it. Yeah.
Right. And then we have then just identified the folks that are more likely to maybe
Ayo.
step up, or who can
The
take more.
leadership team, the ones that are like, oh, we're ready to go. And then other people are just like, I don't know, just pay me my money and I don't want to grow. But yeah, I think you'll always have that. There's some kind of principle in there that, like, 20% of your team makes up like 80% of your results, kind of thing. So it's just like, I think that's in any business there, but, or if you take the square root of your current team, they make up 50% of your production. There's a couple team principles in there. So it's just one of those things that, like, you're going to be able to see those A players and those ones that are on board and who you could grow with. So I think that's great to have those conversations, Paul, which is awesome, man. Well, it's been a pleasure. I know I don't want to keep you too much longer because Paul's on his own. He's got 2 clinics. He's got CrossFit. He's got kiddos. He's got a podcast himself. So, Paul, any parting words of wisdom before we kind of wrap up for today?
No, this has been fun, man. It's been awesome. I'll plug you guys, of course. I mean, Rehab CEOs has been really good for us, honestly. I know Robbie didn't ask me to say that, but it's been really good. It's helped me get organized. And I think, honestly, people can, move at their own speed and how they want to do things. If you really want to go fast, go ahead. You really need to take more time, go ahead. I'm somewhere in between, but I think regardless of the speed you go at it, it's the consistency of effort over time. Okay, you're playing the long game. You're going to get some quick wins, right? Which is great, but you got to keep track of, keep your focus of what you're trying to do for the long term. So that's kind of been my thing. Like, just when things are a little down, just keep your focus and keep consistent.
Yeah, and one thing you say all the time, Paul, and is the yes momentum. So Paul's got a really cool principle where he's just like, we're always just trying to create yes momentum. So before we wrap up, Paul, a little quick tidbit. What's yes momentum mean to you? What's that for your team, and how could other owners keep building yes momentum in their business to be as successful as you?
I don't know how we're
Come on
working on
now.
the success piece, but yeah, yes momentum is just basically, it's kind of like confirming or reaffirming, like in this case, like a new PT coming into who wants to be hired, like the things that matter to them, and then and the agreement points, and we just keep reinforcing that, and it's almost, you build their positive energy, and then it leads to ultimately what you want to do. In this case, hire the person. And it's not a false pretense thing. It's just kind of taking what you've been discussing and kind of hitting those points and kind of focusing on the why it can happen rather than why things can't happen.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and that's the yes momentum.
Yeah, I think people have amnesia. So sometimes even when you're doing, like, Paul would have someone for an interview and he'd be like, hey, like, just want to reconfirm, like, this is the EMR we use. Would that work for you? Yes. Awesome. And just want to reiterate, we do one-on-one for 40 minutes. Could you see yourself doing that model? Yes. Right. Hey, we work with neurological, like, could you see yourself working with that kind of patient demographic? Yes. Right. So it's just like you constantly keep building yes momentum with either your new hires or your current team or whatever that looks like. Because I remember Tony Robbins said, he's like, people always ask me, like, this big Tony Robbins voice. He's like, why do we host so many events? Like, why do we have so many business events? All these UPWs. And he goes, because everybody loses momentum after 60 days. So he said that after 60 days, they come in, they do my event, they get the rah-rah, they get all excited, but then they have this motivation. And then eventually their intrinsic motivation takes over and they go back into the circle of sameness. So he's like, we have to have an annual planning. We have to have quarterly planning. We have to have monthly planning. We have to have weekly, because we know that most people are going to move into chaos and disorder. So we have to keep the momentum. So I love that, Paul. Yes, momentum. So that's great, man. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure watching Paul go from a producer to a unifier role, and then to put leadership team in place and to get leaders around him that actually, like, truly care about the business. I know that's something that owners always kind of wish about. They're like, I wish my team cared about the business as much as I do. And, Paul's got a bunch of players on his team right now that care. He's moving into the communicator role, which he's doing podcasts, he's doing networking, he's doing all this stuff, using his kind of mouth to get his message across. And then, I don't know, man, maybe an operator is in the future here where we start looking at opening some more stuff, and eventually investor, but we'll pump the brakes on that for now. Have you guys do your annual planning meeting, and then we'll see what the team comes back with. But love it, man. So definitely. Been an absolute pleasure, Paul. Always a good time. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. See you. Bye.
Yep. Later.